Hey, folks, this is Will. I just want to say thanks for listening. Thanks for joining the show, being part of the conversation. Patrick and I started this last year as a podcast because we were already having these conversations between he and I and other business owners, entrepreneurs, creatives. And we wanted to open this up and say, if we share this conversation, more people get in it. It's fun. So that's what we're doing. That's what we've done. And we're having fun. We're meeting a bunch of really neat people, hearing their stories, and then getting them to share them with a broader audience. And I think many of the people that we speak with and want to speak with, their stories are relatively unknown, which is the point. And we want to celebrate that and celebrate what people are passionate about, what they're building. So if you're enjoying this, even if you're not, but just go and rate us. Go to Apple, go to Spotify. That would really be awesome if you did that. Leave us a review. That would be even better. We'd love to read your feedback. And then if you have someone that you think has a great story, or someone that you know that is building, someone that has an idea and is making it come to life, send us their name. We'll sit down with them and have a conversation. Okay, that's it. Back to your regularly scheduled programming. Welcome to Business Cake. This is a show where we talk creativity, work, and ideas. In today's show, Patrick and I discuss updates around our own work. We talk about deep work and habits and how can you get the most productivity out of yourself. We discuss intuition and uncertainty, what we feel deeply or viscerally. And we even get into how bad I am at home improvement projects and fixing cars. This is just, the life of an entrepreneur. Grab a slice of business cake. Let's dive in.
Another thing about this is I was reading about venture capitalists and how they, obviously everyone's different, but some of the common characteristics they look for when they're selecting who they're going to invest in. And one of the top characteristics across the board, regardless of charisma or, obviously profitability, but a lot of them are pre-revenue. So the idea or whatever, one of the main characteristics was responsiveness. And if the people they were looking to invest in were responsive to them, it multiplied their willingness to invest. And so I do think there's something to be said for responsiveness.
Yeah, I mean it does communicate something regardless of what is being communicated. Does that you know what I'm saying?
No, I think you're right. Yeah. We're still here. We got your message. We're working on it.
Yeah.
Give me 2
willingness
weeks.
to get in, to engage. Yeah. So, I mean, I can see that. There is, I think, an artificial pace to some of the business world, I think, where you're creating, but then some of it's real. Like if you create deadlines and then you hold yourself accountable to go and get and reach those, that can be a really good thing. But if you're creating deadlines and then making, I don't know, like everybody's lives miserable to reach those, I don't know what the antithesis of a healthy deadline with good accountability would be, but maybe that it's just unnecessary stress.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is people feel like time is, finite, And so the longer you wait on something, like time is money, right? Or that idea where why wait on it? So then I understand that. But I think you're
Yeah.
right. If you make people's lives miserable, what's the point?
Well, and there is that aspect as an investor where if, just going off time is money. If you're going to put your money into something, you want it to be with somebody that is responsive, that's willing to work with you, that is giving you information when you need it. I think that makes sense. And there's, we were talking about my process with
A
just
recent
the
investor?
conversation. Yeah, recent investors and the conversations I've had around that. And, I do think there is an element of somebody will be more willing to give you money the more that you are engaging them around that. It's like the more, especially if for me, I'm an unknown entity in an unknown industry. Um, so
Yeah. What about that
community.
recent investor you had that conversation with that kind of wanted you to jump through a hoop or two? Have you thought about
Um,
that more?
yeah, I mean, I every day I think about it. You know,
What are you going to do?
well, there are. So one of the things that this guy did, I sent him the initial pitch deck. No, no numbers. Like not, I didn't provide my pro forma model in the back end. Things, how I got to my assumptions. I just put in the pitch deck. Here's the narrative. Here's the story. Here's the vision. Here's the ask. Here's the, what you would get from it. So then he took that and sent it to an investment banker. Just like didn't give me a heads up. Just sent it. And then the next thing that I get is the feedback from the investment banker
Sure.
from this guy that
Yeah.
is just lighting it up. So I've answered a lot of those, but then going through that process, it's like I already had answers for these questions. If you would have just asked me, I could have given you the model. I could have given you the answers. I think some of it he may not have known to ask. The other piece is where I am and where investment bankers are looking to invest are two different, completely different areas and stages. I'm looking at it's pre-revenue. So so you're looking at an angel investor or a venture capitalist, somebody that buys into the idea, sees potential for it, and then believes in you and says, "Yeah, you can go do that." An investment banker wants to see numbers and historicals. So it's just, um,
But he was doing his due diligence, but he was delegating it. So he didn't even take the time to
yeah,
look through it. Yeah.
yeah. And so I think re-entering that conversation, it's it's resetting expectations. I think in one phrase that I like is interrogating reality. It's like, where are you coming from? And then where am I coming from? And we need to calibrate that until we are clear we are both talking at a similar plane in a similar language. That when I say this, it means similar, similarly for you. So I, that's just, and that's a lot of work, which is fine if because it's working for an investment and for money. I think where I'm at right now is I'm putting my time and effort and energy into building this. If I do that, I'm also going to be giving away equity for that money. And I'm not convinced just yet that I need the investment just to get started. I think we can bootstrap this for a period of time. And then when it's time to grow, or to expand or to scale, um, maybe at that point we have enough to where I can get a loan, or if I approach investors, then I have mitigated the risk of me being new to the alcohol industry. and said, this is what we've built, this is what we're doing. So, I think there's still risk there for people, which means I would have to give up more equity to make it worth it for them.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think you and him will have to figure out, like you said, on the calibration side, is he coming at it from an investments banker and that's the kind of investment that he's looking for? Or is he willing to be venture
right
with you on it? Yeah, I think, one of the things that I love thinking about, Malcolm Gladwell, one time I was listening to some interview or podcast or something, and he mentioned that he was going to write a book about fit, F-I-T, how things fit, and how a star basketball player can be amazing on this one team with this one coach this one year and then gets traded to another team and completely falls apart, or the coach can't do anything with, and he used the sports examples, but, I see it so much in my life and company, and just does it fit? Are we a good fit? So if somebody wants to come on as a client, that's the first thing for me is like, how's the fit? Like the needs might be there, the money might be there, but the fit's not there. It doesn't matter. And I think it's the same with investors, especially on the side of risk and safety and return, like when they want their money and how much they're looking to get back.
Yeah.
Like it has to be a good fit, and the money has to fit and the investor has to fit with the startup. And I think
that's where,
if you can measure that somehow, or like put a color on, you know what I mean? This is like red light, yellow light, what temperature, or somehow just find this is a great fit. Let's find a way to make it work. Or this is, a yellow fit or something. There's got to be a good scale that you could put into play.
There has to be. I agree. I think one of the things that I have, and maybe this is in experience or, intuitiveness, just learning and failing and figuring out, okay, what is a good fit? But it's like when it feels like I have a square peg and I am trying to fit it into a round hole, that is not a good fit. And so sometimes the work, that back and forth, it's not going to work. Sometimes it's good to push through that, and it's actually just, you're missing the hole. You can't fit it. But I think learning the difference between those kinds of friction, it's like, what is a friction that is productive, that's going to get us through, and then what is a friction that actually needs to halt the process? Or maybe it's a timing thing. You come back a year later and suddenly things click, things work. And so I push, and this is going to sound weird, but then when it gets difficult to that point of stress, it's like, I'm going to stop pushing. I'm going to wait. And somebody could probably read into that and say, Will, you're adverse to hard work. When things get hard, you quit. But it's not that. Like I don't know how else to say that. But
I think there are times to push through and times to let it simmer for a while. And I think you have learned
that's what I'm trying to say is like, there are timings. There are times for that. But I like that. I agree with that of fit. And I think you've got to have it. I was in another conversation with a guy, and he said, it was, there's this opportunity at his company, and he just used the word visceral.
Yeah.
He said, this has to feel viscerally right for you. And just that thought of,
try to pull this out of Pika's mouth.
Oh, nice. Maria has a snake.
What kind of snake is it?
A little garter.
Yeah, just a little checkered garter. He's playing dead.
It's playing dead because the cat had it. Ben would love to see that.
I know, I'm going to put it in a little thing.
It's beautiful.
But just that thought of something being visceral, it's so...
I mean, what about that? I understand
It's just,
the idea, but what do you like or not like about being visceral?
I like the word visceral.
Oh,
I think that's what I like. And I have heard it a couple of times recently. And it's like, yeah, like when something fits well, it just visceral. It visceral. So anyways.
I mean, how many things in your life actually fit at a visceral level though? Because if you're always chasing visceral, it's not going to happen. I think that's what I need to look this word up. I don't have my phone to find the definition of it. I understand the connotation.
Hey Siri, what does visceral mean? No, that's unhelpful.
I think the connotation is nice, but sometimes it could be one of those words that people use to motivate, but they don't actually mean it needs to be visceral. Like if they got something that was decent, they would probably take it even though they said it needs to be visceral.
Relating to deep inward feelings rather than the intellect.
All right. But that's not the same thing as just related to inward feelings. Like we're talking about a deep level.
Right.
And I would just say, I doubt most things that we work with are going to hit that.
Like when you're hiring somebody at Chin Chin, you don't look for somebody that just viscerally fits.
My reads on people are notoriously bad. So I trust the people around me.
Yeah.
Because there have been so many times, like over the last 20 years of working with people in the various settings, where I'm like, this person is not going to work out. And they end up being the best team member. And then other people are like, this one's going to be awesome. And they're absolutely terrible. And so I've just learned, like, suspend judgment. I have no idea what this person's going to do. Maybe I feel good about it. Maybe it's visceral. But that has no bearing whatsoever. And it's disconnected from the actual success or failure of them in the role.
Do you feel joy or pain more viscerally?
Okay, that's a good thought-provoking question. I would say, as an Enneagram 7, which is a type of person that absolutely dislikes pain and actually will go through great lengths to avoid pain. So I cause myself pain to not have pain.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I don't know about the pain side, but the joy side, I feel, yeah, that's deeper. I think pain, obviously there are painful, like your wife leaves you, your kid dies, somebody runs over your dog, like that's deep pain, what are you going to do? Right. But we're talking about like regular, everyday, most of the work life stuff. I would say joy is deeper for me. What do you think?
For you?
No. Oh, yeah, sure. What do you think for me?
Yeah, joy. Yeah. No, I think I would agree with that. I think joy. I think you don't like to feel pain, especially viscerally.
No, I don't.
But I don't think anybody does.
You? No, I do. I think Maria does.
Maria does.
I think there's some receptor or mechanism deep within her that when pain is there, she comes alive. And if there's not that friction and wrestling, there's something that's not active. I've heard her say things like this before. Well, We'll
Yeah,
bring
she's
that one
gonna.
back when we interview her.
Well, and she will be joining us for our recap pod.
Yeah.
That'll be towards the end of March. But
Well,
yeah,
I
no,
think that would be a
I
fun
think you're
question
right.
for her as somebody who actually is joyously motivated by pain. Which one
Yeah.
is deeper?
Joyously motivated by pain. Well, and I think your observation is right. On a day-to-day basis, we like the amount of things that hit a visceral level are probably zero. We are more experiencing things on a much less visceral scale. I don't know what would be less visceral, just normal, I guess. Not deep, shallow
Yeah, just inner feelings, right?
feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the visceral word is, it said not intellectually. So you're not going for just like what logically seems appropriate, but what
Right.
what hits you deeply. So that's also a word that is overused these days that I see in a lot of places where people are like looking for job candidates or talking about something and they say a deep knowledge or like deep
Yeah.
familiarity with this. And it's like the word extensive, yeah, or like expert, like people don't want to use that anymore. And they like deep seek,
Yeah.
whatever. It's one of those funny buzzwords that creeps its way into our vocabulary.
Well, I think it started with, maybe it didn't start with because that would be ridiculous. The word deep has been around for a very long time, but
It's got deep history.
has has a deep history. The the there was a book that came out called Deep Work, and this guy was talking about, I think it was a writer named Cal Newport, who I love. He's a deep thinker, but he was just talking about the fact that it's important in our culture today where things are so busy and there's so many distractions and noise and those things, where you have to set aside like 4 hours to really dive deeply into something, or to get or and to reach a state of flow. He was
Right.
kind of
Right.
tying it into that. But that started this, bringing the word deep into deep work. Those two don't necessarily go together, but he brought them together. Now you have deep.
Yeah. That could have been one of the sparks. Flow state, talking about tempo and pace and work, flow state is, I love that. And getting to a place where you have a chunk of time, 1 or 2 times a week at least, where you're hitting that flow state. Like I think that's one thing about people working remotely as opposed to in office. That's different, because in office you're continually interrupted, and those kind of interruptions don't allow you to get down into that flow state.
Yeah.
And of course it can happen at home too, but I think my personal experience has been, that's why I enjoy working from my house, is I can control 95%. Now, if my cat grabs a snake, obviously I can't control that.
We've got a lot of variables here at the house. Like for me to hit that, I have to leave my house.
When's the last time you had a flow state session of work? Like, I mean, I'm talking about more than 30 minutes.
Yeah. It was last summer, and I drove up to Wimberley for 2 days, and I wrote, and that was the last time.
Did you enjoy it?
I've gotten yeah, I did. It was hard. It was work, but it was rewarding. But I get things done. I can spend an hour on a thing. I can push that, but I think like this week there was more time that I thought I was going to have, but then Goose uh, had his asthma flared up because of the weather and air quality and all of that, and so he was home for 4 of the days. So then it was, it's just, I think you have a lot of kids, you have a lot of animals, then I have to leave those things to hit flow.
Is it, do you think about wanting to get back to a flow state of work, or is that something that you could kind of take or leave?
I think it's situational. Like when I know
Okay,
that
in
there
your
is
situation.
no, I'm about to break that down. I think the the most things that I'm doing right now don't require a state, like for me to be able to have to spend that amount of time on it. But when it hits that point, it's important that I block things out and go do it. And but for me, it's at the beginning stages. It's when I'm planning something. It's when I'm trying to really research an area or dive deeply into that and think about it and then be able to set it out. But once I've done that, then I'm just I'm just following the plan, following the rhythm. I can adjust, I can adapt. It's fine. But at those beginning stages, I think that's launching. That's when I want, or writing for me, that I hit that a lot. Where do you see it? I mean, what are you?
Yeah, I love work. I have to hit that on a regular basis or I don't feel productive.
Okay.
So I literally 1 to 2 times a week. And if I don't get it during the day for whatever reason, dude, I'll work till 2 in the morning and I'll I take a nap and sometimes I wake up like 10:30 at night and I go work and no one's bothering me at all on Trello, on Slack, on emails, on text, in person. And especially the kind of work that I do, trial balances, numbers,
Right.
those kinds of things. Like if I can immerse myself in that and I understand that world, their world, then everything starts to make sense to me. And I hit that flow state. I know exactly, especially if you're looking for like $60,000 and 40 million, you got to find the 60,000. And so the only way I can get there is through hitting that deep level of work where nothing else is on my mind. Obviously it's like 80%, but 80% of what I'm thinking about is going towards one thing. So I really enjoy that. And I find myself feeling behind if I don't have that kind of work on me where I don't have to do those things, I think that's what golf can be for me, is getting into a flow state where I'm there and I'm totally undistracted and engaged in one. And I think that's the other thing I like about golf is like you take a shot and then you're still engaged in the whole task, but it's like that task, that mini task is now over and you start a new one. And so your performance can't be tied to what just happened. Because if it was good, then you're overconfident, you take a bad shot. If it was bad and you're angry, you take a bad shot. And so every time it's like these mini resets in this large flow state for me that helps me feel. So when you were at Rackspace, it's funny because I would have said a need of people in general, wherever you are. And I'm thinking about internationally too, in the different jobs that people, work on a farm or whatever, that hitting a flow state would be a need. But you don't seem to have that need.
I mean, at Rackspace, I would frequently block hours off on my calendar to get away, to think about something. But it's like the work that I have done that I've been doing, it's not like what you're describing where I'm having to. There have been those where I'm having to get down into the data, and so I would have the hours and the time blocked for that. But a lot of it is like bringing the right people together, making sure everybody's on the same page. Everybody needs to know what they're gonna what needs to happen, and I have a couple of tasks associated with that. And it's just like making sure that stuff is moving. And so it was more, it was program management at Rackspace, so it wasn't a specific project I wasn't doing, but it was like several projects, several big things at one time that I had to coordinate. So it was more like that, I think. But I had to make sure there's a lot that for me that happens in my head. So I don't know if that.
So is it a need or not? Because I'm going to say no for you since it was a year and a half ago. Or
I got a lot out of that. I think I still. I mean, it was 2 days by myself, just really deep. It was really
I think working out could be like that. When you kind of you're working out and you hit.
Yeah, but I think about the conversations and the thought I think behind flow is the length of time as well.
Yeah,
like
sure.
you can't hit a state of flow in 45 minutes. It's and I mean, I think Gladwell, every time we talk, we bring up Gladwell, but I think Gladwell talks about the 10,000 hours, and that we might have even been talking about this the other day, where it's the quality of those 10,000 hours. It's not just doing the work. It is like the intentionality and the effort. And I think for me, like, yeah, I go work out and I have to work out every day or do something active, but that's like just a small hit. That's not an extensive time to where I would say I'm getting in a state of flow. Maybe I do need that more, and that's one of the things missing in my life. And I feel that viscerally.
You clearly don't feel it viscerally.
I don't. Yeah.
Well, that's fun. I mean, that's interesting to me. I Melody needs that. We just call it work mode with each other, and it's just, or business mode, where it's like, don't talk to me. Like kindly and respectfully, in all love, just don't talk to me because I'm in work. I'm going to be in work mode. And I think we respect that with each other, where whatever needs I have as a human or whatever can wait until she's finished with her flow and what she's in. And then, so I think because she enjoys hitting that rhythm and I enjoy hitting that rhythm, I just assumed that was a normal part of, people's lives. But I'm open to being wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, Maria and I are very different. I think in that, like, there's so much that goes on that I've found I have to completely remove myself from life rhythms in order to focus. And then, I mean, so the guy Cal Newport talks about that. He has a book called Deep Work. Have I mentioned that?
Not yet.
So, but he talks about setting up his year he's a professor, and he would have the fall semester where he's teaching just a crazy amount of classes, but he gets all of his teaching done in that semester, and then from January through to the summer, then he is researching and he's working, and he's just in like a season of that. And so he talks about setting things up where So I think that's where I'm at. I'm reaching this point where I realized yesterday I need to take time out and I need to go off again to remove myself from the daily rhythms of life so that I can have this time. So it's just.
So when are you going to do that? So when are you going to do that?
I'm gonna. Well, not in March because we're doing we have spring break with the kids and then I'll be in Atlanta. So it'll probably be April before I can get the opportunity to.
Well, I'm interested. Put it on a calendar, and then I'm interested to hear like what your thoughts are afterwards.
Okay.
I'll ask future Will about that. See what he says.
He's going to have a lot to say. I guarantee it.
Maybe.
What? Okay, so where are we on? I don't know if we've talked about it, but where are we on the coffee shop? Do we need to give a recap on this thing?
No. I don't know where.
What about your coffee shop? Where are you on your coffee shop?
Well, we're in a good spot. I think the personal reflection over the last few weeks has been a few months maybe has led me to a point where I realized I probably hit the end of my contribution with this probably 2 years ago, maybe more. And I'm trying to get better at recognizing like where I enjoy contributing, where I need to contribute and it's not necessarily enjoying, and then where I can't contribute anymore on when people ask me, hey, can you participate in this? And so I think for their sakes, the team, for my sake, it's better to be clear about that. And I know it myself because otherwise I'm stretched, I'm overreaching, it's not helpful. And getting the right people in the place and not being afraid to move out of it probably takes a lot of courage. And I think that's one of the things that I had been afraid of addressing. One of the people we talked to, I don't remember over the last few months, but mentioned a book about courage, and I bought it and it's on my shelf. I haven't read it yet, but Melody makes fun of me because I keep mentioning it and I haven't read it. But to me, it's this idea that's calling out of like, have courage. I'll read the book and I'm sure it will help me and change me and put good ideas. But until I do, it's just a lamp that I see to have courage in these situations to, whatever it costs or whatever self-preservation is there, it's probably worth walking through, and so don't be afraid to step into that. Not just ask the questions, but go ahead and like take the chance, the decision, and see what happens.
So with Chin Chin, that's 4 years. How long has that been?
So we committed with money in October of 2020.
Okay.
So a full 4. We're working on our 5th. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're saying year 3.
Yep.
Is when you hit the mark where you were done. Did looking back, hindsight's 50-50, but were there signs? Like, do you see that? Or is it something that, okay.
I see signs and I think primarily there was external factors that just said it's time for some change. And so I tried to manage the external factors as opposed to paying attention to them. And now this is probably specific to me as a starter. I don't know how else it applies in other people's lives. But to me as a starter, I want to come in, I want to get it going, or in transformation. I want to come into a difficult situation, organize, and then hand off. And so, one of the current contracts I'm in, the client was talking about long-term, what he wants for his company, and was like, "Hey, are you interested in staying on?" I was like, "I'm not." The truth is, I probably am interested in it. Like, it's interesting to me what it would be like to do that, but my contribution is going to stop, and I know that, and I'm going to tell him. And I told him, like, you're not going to want me around, and you might think you want me, but you actually need somebody else at that point. And the best thing I can do is help you find that person and get out of the way. Right. Because that's where, like, I think with Chin Chin, we have good partners that are more capable of doing, like, I bring good things to the table, but they are actually more capable in this arena. Right. And it just took me a long time to believe that, and I think once I made the decision and then saw what was happening, I now believe it, but it was like, I doubted that for a long time. I don't know, it's like, I trusted myself too much, and I trusted in my ability to make stuff happen. So I think there's been a process for me just with Chin Chin of looking back to say, this marker I missed, and that's common. I have a lot of times in my life where I stayed too long. And so I think originally growing up, people would tell me it was because I lacked character to stick something through. Like, you're just gonna, you're gonna quit too early. And so I like try and I commit myself and like go for it and try to stay as long as possible. But then it sours and it's like, well, what happened? It's like, well, you stayed too long. And so now I'm at a place where, like, how many working years do I have left? Maybe 20 of like solid contribution. And so the last 20 years, I missed all those markers. And I don't want to do that. I want to know the markers and signals. And they're there, internally too. They're right there. Where it's like, I think the joy hits a peak.
Yes.
And it starts to wane. And instead of blaming myself or questioning what's going on and what's going on, like, so, okay, this is interesting. Like, I think it's kind of what you were talking about, where you just notice there's some different pushback. And it's like, okay, I'm going to pay attention to this instead of just charge my way through. And let's see what happens.
Yeah. There's also, for you, there's a recognition, I think, of the desire to launch and then exit is a desire worth committing to as well. It's kind of what you're talking about. Like, you don't have to. It's not a negative mark of character to exit. It's actually, to be able to exit well is probably a high mark of character. But I mean, I see that, and just in some of our conversations where you are recently very committed to saying, this is where I will play. These are my strengths. This is actually, I mean, in your words, your best contribution. It's where you find the most joy. And just being able to commit to that and say, this is my lane, I guess, and one way to put that. But yeah, I mean, I see that. It's funny because people do want you. Like this guy that you just mentioned. Hey, do you want to stay on long term? People ask you that all the time.
Yes. And I've not. So, I mean, part of me is like, I like being liked. And so when they say that, I'm like, this person enjoys me and wants to appreciate you. So I'm going to do it. Yeah. But it ends up, they don't enjoy me. If that's the reason why I'm doing it, it's not going to work out.
Right.
And so I have to, like, be mature enough to say, all right, that feels good and I appreciate it, but what's really going on here and what's the best? And I don't, I think the other thing is I don't want to pendulum to the other side where it's like, I'm never going to commit long-term or 3 years to something.
Sure.
So I want to remain open-handed and just kind of like take a few steps towards the other side to where I'm still measuring and watching and waiting and discerning like what's the appropriate engagement. So I think the other thing is I do want to provide a lot of value, and I can in that much, in a small amount. And so if I can hit that window and then get out before that window closes, that's going to be awesome. And people are going to love it. And they might be like, oh, we want more. And that's fine. But at least I'll know that this is all it's going to be.
Right.
You know, and let's move on. And that was awesome. And we can write down that everyone agreed that was awesome. Cool. Let's go.
That's good. That's really good. I think may these next 20 years be high value for you and the people you work with.
Thanks, Will. I'll take that.
What one note on the book that you said that you have
Deep Work.
Deep Work by Cal Newport. Yeah. There's this guy Nassim Nicholas Taleb. He wrote one called Black Swan. But he talks about the value of having a big library and not having read all of those books. He's like, the need to feel like you have read all the books in your library is kind of ridiculous. And it's actually more of a mark of a smart, intelligent person that they have a ton of books and they haven't read 2/3 of them, which is it's a great, maybe all you need from that book is the title.
Well, you know, what's funny is every time I walk into my office, I see that on the shelf. You know, it's there. And I know it's something I want to read, I want to pursue, but it still calls me to courage. You know, it's like, be courageous today. And the things, the decisions, the emails, the whatever, be courageous, like have the conversation, be willing to be courageous in whatever it is. And so Talib's cool. I think he's gotten a lot of flack in different areas, but one thing that our dad, Keith Curry, had was a love of books growing up. And I remember he used to say what all leaders are readers or something. And now they change it to all leaders are learners, which I think is definitely more appropriate, especially with the media that's available to us today. That wasn't then. But one thing I will always do is buy books. If my kids want books, I buy them. It doesn't matter what financial state our family is in. And if somebody recommends a book to me and it hits on a non-intellectual level, maybe viscerally, maybe not, maybe visceral light.
Just resonates.
That's probably like the next level up. That's good. As I buy it on Amazon, I commit to buying it, you know, and put it on my shelf. And in some books I don't read all the way through. You know, I'll read half of it and it's like, all right, I get you. They need to have 10,000 words or whatever to make a sale.
A book. Right.
Yeah. No, but I like that idea. I wonder if it's an excuse sometimes for people to not read the books, but who knows?
Well, I mean, in a lot of books, the idea they just put it right there in the title, and then the rest of the book is explaining it. You know, which may be helpful and may not be. I don't know. I'm reading one of Taleb's right now called Anti-Fragile.
And that's the one that your dog chewed up, right?
It is, which was ironic because it's talking about benefiting from disorder. And the book just stayed torn up.
Dude, that's so good.
But that is his concept, is fragile, and how do you apply that into your decision making and into your health and your life in all these ways to where you are not broken by uncertainty and chaos and disorder, and also you're not neutral, which is what he calls being robust or resilient, which is just unaffected by it, but that you actually improve and can grow from that. And I was listening to this conversation between a couple of people, and they were talking about their kids and what is the right time to bring things up to your kids, and knowing that. And they were talking about sheltering and protecting them, and but really, using Taleb's framework, they're treating their children very fragilely and not realizing that actually, as humans, we are anti-fragile. We grow, we can grow in times of stress and pressure. And when things are hard, then it's like we can benefit, we can mature, we can improve. I think when it is just constant and high stress, that's probably unhelpful. But and so that's what he talks about, is getting these little stressors, these little things where you are growing. And with plants, if you're planting a tree, you give it stabilizers. But if you leave those stabilizers on too long, then it is detrimental to the tree because it doesn't get micro fractures from the wind and get to rebuild. It's like our muscles and those things. So, I mean, I think you can see that principle applied working out. You can see it in nature. But it's a good thought. That's one of the things that I'm thinking about with Rackspace, because that's one of the writing projects that I have. And Rackspace was disrupted and did not benefit from that. I think probably you can look at a lot of companies where we don't benefit from it. But I don't think it has to be like that. If you're building a company, how do you build it in a way to where you can be aware of the signs? I mean, it's like what you were talking about in your personal life, where you reached that threshold at Chin Chin and you didn't recognize it soon enough. I think within a business, within an organization, you could do the same, where it's like you can get good at recognizing signs and knowing when to pivot and knowing what to do, but it takes a lot of work. I think that's my theory.
So what's the fragile or anti-fragile aspect for you, like in not Rackspace, but like where you are?
Well, I'll take the distillery. I think as we are building that out, we are trying to do so in a way where we are flexible, where we're not confined to just doing business one way or with one group or with one market. So we've set up our Mexico entity to export, and we're setting up our US entity as an import company. But if tariffs in the US go super high and we are unable to bring product into the US, that doesn't drown our business. It doesn't just immediately tank us. We can find markets internationally, not in the US, to export and to sell to. And I think that is probably one thread, one example where
You're building
in some way,
your setup is not fragile. So you're making sure, like from the ground up, you're building in a way that creates flexibility, but not rigidness.
right. And you have to do that with the contracts with distillers. You have to do that. You have to, if you don't have that mindset at the start, then you find yourself in a situation where you just can't. Like in Mexico, if you do not explicitly say we are also going to export, then you can only distill, and you have to sell to a company that will export. And if you don't clarify that at the start, then you're it's too sorry. They won't really let you do it.
What about in your
So,
personal life?
I think it's the idea or the practice of like risk and the amount of risk that we're exposed to, trying to set things up to where there are little risks, and if it falls through, then be it'll be painful but not detrimental. And so I think that's one, is how are we doing that with our work and the things that we do. I think when I think about development, or these times like deep work, talking about that, like it's setting up the system to know how am I gonna take time to recharge or to respond. So I don't know. It's a new way to think about it. So I'm still trying to use that lens to look at my life and
Well,
see.
you brought up your kids. Like, what about with your kids? Where have you seen a time where you and Maria took that stance?
I mean, I think we decided early on. There's a book on my shelf actually that I didn't finish called Dirt is Good. And when our kid Zara was probably 3 years old, so we had Zara, Sophie, and Ben, 3, 2, 1. And it was that idea of, we are going to allow them to get messy and dirty, and we're not going to freak out about it. So when we're at a restaurant and they decide to just sit on the floor and play, or and say just letting them do that, I think that's expanded as they've grown to the kinds of conversations we have with them. So around 8 years old, it's been around that time that I have had a conversation with the kids around, hey, where I'm going to be more upfront with you about things. We're not going to shelter, but we want to have conversation. And in order to have conversation with you, we're going to share things. And I want to hear your questions. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear what you're wrestling through. But it requires on our end the intentionality not to try to protect them from stuff. And I think that gets really uncomfortable as a parent.
Yesterday, Dorian came home and he was like, hey, it was just me and him at the house. And he said, hey, I was singing a song at school and somebody told me I shouldn't say that word and I need to ask you about it. I was like, okay, what's the word? And he said, pips. I was like, yeah, I don't think that's what it is. What was the song? And so some rap song, I don't know. And something about pimps, drop it like it's hot. He's like, oh, okay, pimps, what's that? So I explained it to him. It's like, this is what a pimp is. Like, honestly, in your life, probably not going to run into a pimp. But
right,
if you do, you know what their job is. And I had to, it was funny because I found myself explaining it objectively like a job. And then I had to go back and be like, also, this is probably not a good thing, by the way. Like, this is not like
it's not a career opportunity.
No, like, right. I mean, but I was like, they got a lot of money, they tell people what to do. Then it's like a lot of other things obviously associated with that. But I had to just make sure at the end, like, this is not good, right? Like, don't be a pimp. Like, don't think about that. Yeah.
Right.
But it was the same situation where I was like, okay, I could skirt around this and just be like, pimps are bad people. But he's almost 13 and I'd rather him know he can come to me and trust our conversation. I'm going to give him all the information. So when he goes back into that situation in school, he's equipped and he's armed and he knows how to deal with whatever that conversation is.
Yeah.
So I had to make sure he understood what prostitution was.
Yeah, I mean that's part of it's a key part of being a pimp. So
Anti-fragile.
Yeah, I like the thought. I mean, I think we'll see how I like the idea. We'll see how it carries on. The just as we're on this topic of kids, there's this idea of explanatory depth, where you have an understanding of how something works, but then you try to explain it, and you realize you don't. So, I mean, the key example that's used a lot is the toilet. And if you say, "Okay, explain to me how the toilet works," and people and you start walking through that, and you realize, I actually don't know how it works. I just flush the handle and it works and it's great. Stop asking me to explain the step-by-step process for this. And it came up with the kids with hacking, and we were at dinner and they kept talking about hacking. And so I just said, okay, what is hacking? Tell me what hacking is. And for the next 30 minutes, all of the kids tried to explain what hacking is, and they have zero understanding of what it actually, they like get the basic concept that it's kind of like cheating or getting into somewhere, but they don't actually know what a hacker is or what a hacker does. And the analogies, dude, I just wish I had recorded the conversation and animated it.
Yeah.
Because it was like they were trying to pull, well, it's kind of like when somebody is doing this thing, but it's not at all that. It was
So
was
how
wonderful.
did you explain it to them?
I didn't. I just left it.
Oh, did you really? Can you explain it?
I don't know.
Dude, you worked at Rackspace.
I know.
Hackspace.
The reality is,
all rackers are hackers.
There are a lot of ways. Hacking is probably an umbrella term now that people use. I hack my DNA, I hack my body, I hack the system.
Oh, yeah. Life hacks.
And so, yeah. So I think it's a lot broader. At one of the ways that would happen a lot at Rackspace is social engineering. I mean, people think it's just you have a laptop and you break into a network and everything is just like you with your fingers into the keyboard and you're just typing all these commands and finding the vulnerabilities in it. But most of the time when a vulnerability occurred at Rackspace, it was social engineering, where there was a person and they would just repeatedly call in and they would get a little bit more information every single time until they finally got the code to get into the account and then be able to go and do things. And so it started through people. So,
yeah, Dallas Willard talks about knowledge and intuition in a really cool way. Because he said, this kind of goes back to the 10,000 hours, which I think Gladwell eventually backed up on and said, I don't buy it anymore. But Willard says, if you want to be good at something, you have to start with intuition. Do you have a sense about how this would work without having any knowledge? And then you use that to learn. Then the 10,000 hours is applicable. And I think that's what people assume in 10,000 hours is if you put 10,000 hours in, you're just going to be good at it. My business coach that I'm working with right now said he practiced guitar when he was 50. He picked it up and he started practicing guitar. And I don't know how many hours he put in. It probably wasn't 10,000, but he realized at one point, he said he took a guitar with him everywhere he traveled. He bought a travel guitar so he could practice, and he practiced at the airport and he practiced. He was like, I just got to the point where I realized I'm not going to be good at this and I don't enjoy it. And so he put it down. And Willard would probably say, okay, there needs to be some intuition that exists prior to the knowledge. Then you get the knowledge. But the best people in those fields are the ones that then use their intuition that's now trained based on the knowledge to be able to function in the field. And that's where they can, they're thought leaders because they're adding value. They're adding value through intuition based on knowledge. So like the toilet thing, man, I have 2 books of the way things work. I have the original edition that guy wrote way back in the day. Have you ever seen that book? It's the Woolly Mammoth, dude.
Yeah.
I love that book. And I've looked at the toilet multiple times, and I got the new version and I still looked at it. And it's like, when you brought that up, I was like, that is such a good example because, I mean, I know I'm probably dumb in this area. Like people that understand the toilets, like it's super easy, but it's like, dude, I couldn't explain to you how that works, where the valves are and why there's water in this side and then it goes down. And I don't know.
I mean, I know vacuum is somewhere in there, but it's mostly magic. I'm pretty sure.
I have no intuition about toilets and no knowledge.
No.
But I think that's one thing that when I'm working with people or my kids on what kinds of things they want to get into or they're doing or things that I look for if I want to work with somebody in a role is, do they have like that intuition to learn it? Because a lot of people have come to be like, hey, I want to be a bookkeeper. And it's like, okay. So I'll talk with them a little bit and realize they have no intuition about this. And I'm not going to work with them because I can spend all the time dumping knowledge in and there's no pre-existing magic that they can put that with in order to be good at it.
Yeah. That's helping people assess that would be like, how do you understand if somebody has a intuition about something without just intuiting that they have an intuition? How have you done that?
Yeah, no,
How do you get a read on that?
I let them talk a lot. And then I can tell where they're parroting things that they've learned or heard or seen, as opposed to they've digested it. Or if I put a situation to them, in bookkeeping and the tools or the elements that they bring to the table to solve that problem, I can see these are not the right set of tools. Like there are other tools. And if you bring those, I'd be like, okay, you at least understand what it's going to take and I'll help you sort those properly and know which tools to use at what point. Then I can work with that. And I don't know how to explain that. That's probably more intuition on my part in working with them than knowledge.
I have examples of that where it happened with me. Both of them were in college. One of them was fixing my Jeep and trying to replace the starter.
Okay.
And I worked on it. Our friend Grant Simpson helped kind of walk me through the process of what I need to do.
Dylan's dad.
Yeah, Dylan, who
our listener.
Our listener. We have a few more listeners now, but Dylan for sure was the pioneer.
Jonathan Welch, Ryan Reed. They're coming in droves now.
Maria. But it took, I sat there for 3 hours trying to replace this. I couldn't even get the old starter removed. And Grant would just come by and then finally came by just laughing at me and handed me a specific tool that I needed that got around the weird elements of the car. And I now replaced it really quickly after that. But I had no intuition that I was using the wrong set of tools. I had no idea, no thought. And I was just sitting there essentially banging my head against this for 3 hours, not thinking, hey, well, maybe there's a better way to do it. Yeah. But it just helped me helped me realize, okay, cars are not my thing. And I
thought you were going to tell the scooter story.
That's a different one. The other one is...
No, the scooter story with the spark plug. Do you remember that one?
I don't remember this one.
Dude, that one is one of my favorite Will Curry stories.
I blocked it from my memory, I guess. What is this starter story?
So you had to replace. You found out through some. You remember your scooter that you had.
Yeah, I
got
remember
stolen.
the scooter.
Was
it was
involved in
great.
a murder trial or something.
Yes, I had to show up at court because of it. Yeah.
So it had some issue, and somebody told you the spark plug needs to be replaced. It's a single spark plug, and
Easy.
Maybe, but it was at the house. They're off Greenlot, and a few of us were hanging out in the kitchen, and you just were out in the driveway working on it. And before you started, you had come and be like, "I'm going to replace the spark plug," and we're just like, "Great, Will, it's one spark plug. How long could it take?" And so you walked out there, and I guarantee you it was at least 30 minutes. I want to say it was close to an hour, but it was at least a half hour for sure.
Yeah.
That you were out there. And then you came back in, and you were frustrated because you were like, I can't get this thing in. Somebody was there that knew what to do, and they walked out, and you were putting it in upside down the whole time. And it was so funny to me because it was like one spark plug, and it was just upside down. It wasn't even not having the right tool. Everything was there.
That's great. Yeah.
It's so funny.
No, that's a great example of zero intuition. Absolute zero intelligence when it comes to that. But
what was the other story you were going to say?
The other one is I worked a construction job for 2 weeks, and at the end of the 2 weeks, this was with Clint. At the end of the 2 weeks, the foreman came up to me, just like pulled me aside at the end of the job and just said, "Hey, I think you can make a lot more money doing something different
somewhere else." Yeah.
Yeah. Just not doing this.
What a great way to say that.
It was great because I got the message and I agreed with him. Yeah, I could. I think I spent 3 hours painting a door, and it was on that day. He was just like, I had to. There was so many examples in that 2 weeks where it just took me too long to do a basic job,
right?
Where he just learned, okay, yeah, this isn't for you, man. So I guess when it comes to cars and scooters and construction, I pay people to do that. I don't have a lot of intuition for that.
That's good. And toilets. We won't talk about your toilet story.
Oh my gosh. Dude, we could do a whole...
Just give us a quick snippet on that one because you haven't told it yet. And that one's that's like in the last year, right?
Well, this is particularly... There are several things in my relationship with Maria where she is better at something that traditionally people would think a guy is better at.
Yeah.
And I am not good at it. And one day she said, "Will, I'm going to replace the floor in the bathroom." And I immediately started to get stressed out to the point to where I said, I'm not helping you on this. This is your job. Because sometimes she'll start something and then I have to get in and finish it. And where I already lack intuition into these things and I don't have the experience for it. It's, anyways. So she starts working on it. She takes out the toilet. This is in our upstairs. And it looked like the plywood that the toilet was sitting on was rotted. So before we removed the toilet, then it was, oh my gosh, like we're going to have to replace the entire floor. Like the house is a 40-year home. I'm sure that toilet has overflowed several times over the 40 years it's been in existence. But we start getting in and then I just realized, okay, hold on. It's actually solid. It's not rotted. It's fine. We don't have to replace it. But we do need a new toilet. And so in the process of now I am involved and replacing the toilet, I like sawed off I don't even know the words for these things, the connector to the copper tube because it wouldn't come off. So I got a file saw and I sawed it, and then in the process sawed a hole into the top, and then thought, well, I can just patch the hole with plumbing putty and tape and do that. So I went through this whole process, 6 or 7 trips back and forth to Home Depot because I would forget to take the piece that I needed, and so I didn't know the size, all these things. It was terrible. It was an entire day. We get the toilet in. The toilet that I bought was too big, so then we had to saw the little baseboard so that the
Yes.
toilet would fit.
Yes.
It was just a series of terrible.
How many hours are you in at this point? At the point that you terminate?
It was probably 3 hours one evening, and then the entire day the next day. So I am at this point. It's the evening. We end up having to call a plumber because I get the toilet replaced and it's just leaking at that copper tube point to where I connected it. It's leaking, and I was done. Maria could see that I was done. So we call a plumber. The plumber comes 15 minutes later. He comes back down, and he's holding up the end of that copper tube, and he's like, well, here's the problem. Like, there's just a little hole in it. And I look at Maria and just said, thanks, pay the guy. It was the hole that I had sawed into it, and I had created the problem. And it was just my lack of, I mean, we don't need to underscore it anymore.
No, we don't. But yeah, it's a perfect example, especially of not only not being able to do it, but you made the situation worse.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And somebody that had common sense about those things, Dylan Simpson, he could have gone in there and just done it, and he's moving on with his life.
Well, he's an electrical contractor.
I know, but Dylan, he knows these things.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like his dad. So,
no, I feel like that's right. I think that's similar to like the Chin Chin setup, where it's like my solutions were causing leaks in places that other people were like not, they could see all of it. And they're like, but when it's intangible like that, it's a little harder. It takes longer, to pinpoint what exactly it is.
But see, that's where, I'm one of my clients that I'm consulting with right now. He's going through an acquisition. He's being acquired. I can step into that, and he's stressed. It's like he is in the place that I was in, just thinking about Maria replacing the floor in the bathroom, and he's like, I need somebody to step in. I step in there, and I know, oh yeah, this is how it's going to play out. This is what's going to work. This is where we are in the process. And so then, it's reversed. Like, I can see how when it comes to the business, or when it comes to organization, or these kinds of processes and systems, I get that. I get the technology pieces and how to help these things function or work together. So it's just when it,
yeah, that's great. It's so nice when you as a person discover what, that specific skill set or, whatever that you have that other people don't, the unconscious competencies that you're just good at naturally without having to think about it. And other people, for them, it's a frustration.
Yeah.
Because that's where, some of your unique contribution lies right there.
Business Cake is produced by Sound Ops. The music is written by Philip Cusius, and this is hosted by Will and Patrick. If you enjoyed it, please rate us 5 stars wherever you find your podcasts.